With the help of Hashem, we are learning Beitzah Daf Dalid. We left off on Daf Gimel Amid Beis. We learned a very important Beitzah that we will quickly recap on Daf Gimel Amid Beis. The Beitzah first reiterated the din that we learned in the Mishnah, the first din in the Mishnah, Keshitas Beis Hillel L'chumra, that the Beitzah says that a Beitzah that's noel the b'Shabbos, or whether it was laid on Yom Tiv, you're not allowed to handle it, you're not allowed to be metaltal it, etc. Then the Beitzah said, rule number 2, usfeika asura. And the Havamina was, usfeika means that if there is a doubt whether the egg was laid on Shabbos or on Yom Tiv. And then the Beitzah gave halacha number 3, clause number 3, that if this egg got mixed up with even another 1,000 eggs, they are all prohibited. And as the Gemara pointed out, that there appears to be some sort of inherent contradiction. In other words, if the case number 3, which is l'cho'ura, continuation from case number 2, if we are speaking about an egg that was born on Yom Tiv, or there is a doubt whether it was born on Yom Tiv, so we went back to the 4 interpretations we had in the Mishnah. Bishleim, according to Rabbah, Hachana the Rabbah, who explained Shitas Beis Hillel based on a Doiraisa, Safek Doiraisa L'chumra. What the Gemara doesn't verbalize, but the Rishonim do, even if you're going to follow the first approach of Rav Nachman, on that Beis Amud Aleph, that it has to do with what? With Muksa. Even though Muksa is a Derabanan, but it's considered a very stringent Derabanan, let's call this a quasi Doiraisa Sveika, we can understand that it's going to be L'chumra. But according to Rabbi Yosef, according to Rabbi Yitzchak, it's a typical Gezerah, Safek Derabanan should be L'kula. So for that, the Gemara responded, Enachanami, that when the Beitzah says Sveika Asura, it's not you have a doubt whether the egg was laid on Yom Tov or on a weekday. Sveika refers that there's a doubt whether this egg came from a mother, came from a hen, that is a treifa. And the rule is that anything that comes that is omitted from a treifa is accordingly a treifa. You have a doubt whether it came from a treifa. That's called a safek doiraisa. And that's why the Beitzah said Sveika Asura. The problem is, what's about case number 3? In other words, if we're speaking about a egg that's laid on Yom Tov, since the only prohibition is on Boi Bayoim, that's called a davar. That's an item that will become permitted. Something that becomes permitted, davar sheyesh lematirin, is not nullified. Because wait until the next day, wait until it will become permitted. But now that you establish that we're speaking about a safek treifa, that never will become permitted, so why is it not nullified? So the Gemara's answer is because an egg, which is at least typically sold by a unit, that was the whole sugya of kol shadarka limanos. As shadarka limanos is considered halachically a significant item, a davar chashuv, and a davar chashuv is also not subject to the laws of nullification. Afilu be'ela floy batel. The Gemara was going back and forth that not everyone holds that an egg has that level of chashivus, because if we're going to follow the version b'shitas Rav Meir that only es shedarkei limonis, only something that is exclusively only sold by unit is something that's considered chashuv and not nullified. Eggs are not only exclusively sold by unit. There are times that people sell them by bulk, by approximation. That's where we left off. So the Gemara said, true, that even the ones who are goyres b'shitas Rabbi Meir, es shedarkei limanos, Rabbi Meir is not the only Tana that opines on this topic, and that's where we left off on Daf Gimel Amid Beis. We're going to quote a Mishnah that speaks about litra kitziyos. We'll speak about that again, the kitzid, and we will find that there are actually various versions as to what is the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. But according to Rabbi Yehuda's version, according to Rabbi Yoshua, we will find that if there's an item that is even only sometimes sold by unit, it indeed is considered already chashuv, and it will not be nullified, and that will explain the Beitzah. And on Daf Daled Amid Beis, we're going to go back and we're going to explain another understanding of usfeika asura. It's going to lead us into a recap of the rule of the principle known as breira, retroactive clarification, as we will apply this to our din of an egg that was laid on Yom Tiv. And ultimately what we will begin, at least on Daf Daled, and this mamish will continue until the end of Daf Hey, is Rav opined 3 times regarding a case that is similar one to the other. One will be what happens if Shabbos and Yom Tov fall consecutively one after the other. Makes no difference whether Shabbos is day number 1, Yom Tov is day number 2, or the opposite. What happens if an egg is laid on the first of these 2 holy days? We paskin like Beis Hillel. What's going to be the law regarding the egg on the second day? If it was laid, let's say Yom Tov, let's say a Sunday, if an egg was laid on Shabbos, okay, you can't handle it. It's asur b'tiltul, asur to eat it. What will be the status of the egg on the next day? That is case number 1 in which Rav opined. We'll see what he says. The next topic will be on a 2-day Yom Tov b'chutz la'aretz. Or 2-day Yom Tov b'chutz la'aretz, we keep. All right, and that will be the whole topic regarding why do we keep 2 days Yom Tov? What's going to be regarding an egg that's born on one day? Will it be permitted or not on the second day? And Rav gave an opinion. And then the 3rd one, will be regarding the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. And we will see how the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are not to be viewed like a typical 2 days Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz. And on Daf Daled, Amud Beis, this is a very important daf. Aside of many details about the rules of nullification, like Ein Mevatlin, Isser Lechatchila, etc., we will properly understand the origin and how are we to view the 2 days of Golus, when was it established in Chutz La'aretz, and a lot more. And without any further ado, Chavra Nachamal Daf Gimel Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom, the Tanan, what we are looking here is to find a Tana who holds that if something is even only sometimes sold by individual unit, that renders this item chashuv, that renders this item significant, and thus we apply the rule that it's not going to be nullified afilu be'eluf leibat. This is the case of the Mishnah. Litra ketzios. We're speaking here about pressed figs. Now let's just make it clear. We're going to learn the Gemara according to the vast majority opinions of the Rishonim that figs only have to be tithed midrabanan. We're speaking about truma figs, so it's a rabbinic truma, but nevertheless it's truma. Now truma can only be eaten by a kohen. If truma gets mixed with other food items, obviously if it's discernible, if you can recognize it, take it out. But if there is a demua, if there is a mixture, so b'chlal truma does become nullified in the ratio of 100 to 1. And if you don't have that ratio, then you have to treat all of that produce, all of those fruits, as if it is truma. And there's a lot of consequences, not that you have to give it all to a kohen, but that only a kohen can eat any of it, which substantially diminishes the value of this mixture. Now, they would have these molds, these round molds, into which they would press these dried figs, and it would become like a cake, and they would take them to the marketplace, and people would buy a certain slice of it. And what happened here is, you had litra is a quantity. We're going to follow Shitas Rashi that it is the quantity of a loig, of ketzios, of dried pressed figs. Shederasa al pi igol, it was pressed into this round mold. And you know that in other words, one of the molds, the top of the mold, has truma. But ve'eino yoidea be'eze igol derasa. You have many molds in front of you, and you don't know into which one of the molds that you press in these ktzios of truma. Or 2 other cases that are very similar, or if you pressed it into some sort of barrel, but it's on the mouth of the barrel, that's important, and there are many barrels in front of you, or the 3rd case, the last line in the Amid, al pi kaveres, you have some sort of basket, and again you pressed it into the mouth of the basket. So there is a machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, but there is a machlokes Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. What did those 2 Tanoim say? So Rav Meir, the version of Rav Meir is, Rav Meir's version of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua is, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Daf Dalid, that we are allowed to be extremely lenient. Royen esho el yoinois ki ilu hein perudois. We look at the top of, let's go to the first case, to the top of this eagle, of this round mold. See, let me explain it like this. If you were to have 101 of these molds, and in one of them you press the truma, then b'chlal it's a non-issue, since you don't remember in which one it is, so therefore it's nullified in the ratio of 100 to 1. Eloma, the problem here is that you don't have 101 of these round molds or barrels or baskets. However, says, according to Rabbi Meir, says Rabbi Eliezer, we are allowed to make believe, to view every mold, not that since I know that the truma was pressed in the mouth on the top of the molds, I'm only focusing on the top. No, let's say if one mold has the quantity of 20 liters, 20. So we can count, we can say that 20, the mold, the truma was pressed into the top. Well, the top is 1, there's another 19 here. Let's look at the other molds. If you are allowed, and he says you are allowed to make believe, to imagine as if every mold has different liters that are separated one from the other, so now you see many, many more liters. You're not only focusing on the mouth of a mold, even though you know it's only in the mouth. You get to look at how many liters do you have in every barrel, in every mold, in every basket. And if sum total you have 100 versus 1, so there's the ratio of 101 that's going to be nullified. So you allow that the hatachtoinois, all of the lower parts of all of the molds, yes, malois esol yoinois, they will be able to nullify the upper ones. Obviously, you do have to have the ratio total of 100 against the 1, but now you are allowed to make a lot more use of every one of these baskets, of these molds, and of these barrels. Chevra, it's clear. Clear, yeah? In other words, if I have something on top of this cup, if I can only view the top of the cup, then I need to have another 100 of cups. But if I say, there's an inch of every cup, but every cup is 10 inches, then I have 10 in each cup, then every cup counts for much more. However, Rabbi Yeshua is more machmir, and he says no, that you're not allowed to, so to say, separate the litras of every mold. You could only focus on the mouths. Im yesha meya pumin. If you have 100 mouths, whether it is from the mold, whether it is from the barrel, whether it is from the basket, so then yes, now you have the ratio of 100 to 1, yalu. But if not, hapum and asurin, v'hashulayim mutarim, it won't be nullified. But there's an upside. Even though it's not nullified, the doubt is only concerning the top, the mouth, the openings of these molds. So you have to treat all of them. Maybe it's truma. But the sholayim, which means the bottom parts, which is the 99% of these molds, anything beneath the mouth, for sure there is no truma in any of them, so all of them can be consumed as chulin is. Now that is version number 1. Now just to explain why is Rabbi Eliezer so lenient. So Rashi says, Taka, since truma of Peiros is only midrabanan, indeed we get to be extremely lenient. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he has a different version of the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. What's his version? Also that Rabbi Eliezer is more lenient. Rabbi Yeshua is more strict. But each one is going a little bit more chamur than the tradition of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, im yesha meya pumin yalu, that you have to have the ratio of 101. No one says, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that you get to, so to say, imagine as if the figs in each one of these molds are separated one from the other. You only look at the top, at the mouths, and you have to have 100 to 1. And then yalo, then it will become nullified. We take one out, we give one to the kohen, and everything else is good. But if not, according to Rabbi Yehuda's version, Rabbi Eliezer says exactly that which Rabbi Yeshua says according to Rabbi Meir's version. Now Rabbi Yeshua Omer, even if you have 300 molds, it's just a number. Obviously there's a reason for the 300, but even if you have the 101 ratio, lo yalu, these figs will never become nullified. And you know why? Because many times, it doesn't even have to be most of the times, These pressed figs are sold by unit. We're speaking about a unit of a litra. And therefore, it's considered something that's chashiv. And even though it's only truma midrabanan, doesn't matter. The dinim of nullification don't apply to that which is halachically considered significant. So this is going to be the shita, as the Gemara explains, that even though sfeika of the Beitzah on Daf Gimel Amud Beis is about a suffix of treifa, it's a davar she'ein lo matirin. Why is it be'elef won't be batel? Because eggs are sold many times by unit, which makes eggs chashuv. So therefore, it's not nullified. Oh, now let's continue to learn another Beitzah. Says the Beitzah, the rasa be'igol. It sounds to be the same case, like the Mishnah we just quoted, that if you have again these pressed figs and you press them into the mold, you don't know into which mold you pressed it. Everyone agrees that you will be able to nullify it. The Gemara interrupts and the Gemara asks, Divrei Hakol, what are you talking about? Hainu pluktayu. This is the machlokes that we had above. We just quoted Rabbi Yehuda's version of Rabbi Yeshua. B'chlal, pressed figs are never nullified. So Amar Rav Papa Hachika Amar, that drasa be'igol, the case of the Beitzah is that if you press these figs into the mold, and you don't know into what part of the mold you pressed it. Not like the case of the Mishnah, that you know it was pressed on the top, on the mouth. You pressed it somewhere. You don't know whether it was to the north, whether it is to the south. That's these directions are typically used, even though we're speaking about inside a keli. Says the Beitzah here, since you don't know in which part, divrei hakol yalu. In this case, everyone will say what Rabbi Meir says. Rabbi Eliezer says that that it's going to become nullified. Now let me explain something over here. That here, the liter of truma is not a recognizable unit. You see, if you know that you pressed it to the top of the mouth, the top is a recognizable unit. Even though we just said that according to Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yeshua, if something is only sometimes sold by unit, it's not nullified, shkoyach, that's if it is a recognizable unit. If it's b'chlal not a recognizable unit, there's some figs pressed somewhere in the barrel. So right now, for sure, divrei hakol, it's going to become nullified. Unlike, just in contrast, an egg. You know that there is an egg that might have come from a treifa, and this egg gets mixed up with a whole box of eggs. Every egg is recognizable. Every egg is recognizable, and that's why the Beitzah says that it's never going to be nullified. Okay, now 13 lines from the top of the Amid, going back to the Beitzah and Daf Gimel Amid Beis. The Rav Ashi Omar, that the way we learned Pshat in the beginning will stand. The Beitzah introduces the law of an egg that's laid on Shabbos or on Yontif, Muktzah. The next case of the Beitzah, Sfeika, is speaking about, you have a doubt whether it was laid on Shabbos or on Yontif. And now, if it's speaking about a doubt whether it was laid on Shabbos or not, or on a weekday, that explains the third clause. That's why it's not going to be nullified, because of the rule that any davar sheyesh lematirin is not batel. The question we had was according to Rav Yosef and according to Rav Yitzchak, going back to the beginning of the Masechta, that they understand that the problem with an egg that's laid on Shabbos or Yom Tov is a isur derabanan. So what was our kasha? Safik derabanan lo hakel. Now Rav Ashi answers that lo ilam safik yom tov safik chayil. But since it is a davar sheyesh lematirin, because the din of the egg that's laid on Yom Tov is only muktzah on Yom Tov, or only asir gezerah on Yom Tov, as we learned above, and here Rav Ashi adds a nuance, even if the isur is only midrabanan, nevertheless it is not nullified. So now continues Rashi to explain that just like when it comes to the laws of bittul, we're machmer based on the logic, it's anyways going to become permissible. In our case, the next day. So it's not going to be nullified. Says Rashi, similarly, we're going to be machmer by saying that safik is going to be asur. Gavaldik. No, safik derabanan lekula is because We're dealing with a rabbinic law upon which we could be lenient. But the fact that this is a davar sheyesh lematirin, and therefore we are machmer, it's not batul. If we are machmer with it, then we will also be machmer with it safek. So yes, safek the rabbanan l'kula, but there are exceptions. By a davar sheyesh lematirin, it's not going to become. It will never be subject. I'm saying it's not subject to bittul, and when there's a doubt, we will be machmer. Same logic. No, you have a doubt. Don't eat it. Wait until tomorrow. Okay, Atkan. Now, what did we do until now? We had really 4 reasons that explain the shita of Beis Shammai. The shita of Beis Hillel in the Mishnah. Beis Hillel is machmer. Beis Hillel says you can't eat the egg. Really, you can't even handle the egg. Why? Okay, Rav Nachman, Rabba, Rav Yosef, Rabbi Yitzchak. Now we'll focus on Beis Shammai. Why is Beis Shammai lenient? Tanya. We learned in the Beitzah, Achedim Oimrim, in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, and Chevra, let's remember that the Tana Rabbi Eliezer, he's known as Shamuti, which has 2 meanings. One of which is that he is a Talmud of Beis Shammai. Generally, he's aligned with the Shita of Beis Shammai. That Beitzah, Teyachel, he ve'imam, that an egg that's laid on Yom Tiv, the egg and the mother is allowed to be eaten. Frekti Gemara, hold on. B'may askinon. Mamash going back to the beginning, to Dav Beis. Ilema dat acherim. Mishum Rabbi Eliezer is speaking about a tarnagoyles. Ho'imedes la'achilom. If we're speaking about the hen that was prior to Yom Tov already designated to be consumed, pshita dihi ve'ima sharia. I don't need to have a acherim. I don't have to have a Rabbi Eliezer. Elot must be betarnagoyles that was actually designated legadol beitzim. It was designated to lay eggs. Oy bazoi he ve'ima should be asura. Now hold on. Let's go back to Dav Beis. No. Let's speak about. You changed your mind. Rab Shimon has a very limited application of muksa. Who says that he subscribes to muksa? So you should know that Rabbi Eliezer, we know that Rabbi Eliezer follows Rabbi Yehuda's application of muksa. So now we got a problem. No, it's normally we say Rabbi Eliezer follows Beis Shammai. No, but here, if we're going to say that we're speaking about a Tanach Ho'imedes Legadol Beitzim, so Rabbi Eliezer, who subscribes to Rabbi Yehuda's broader application, he should subscribe to the fact that there is muksa. So clarifies Rab Zera that this Beitzah, Achedim Mishum Rabbi Eliezer, is speaking about a unique case where the Beitzah says, you want to know whether you can have the egg? It depends whether you're eating the mother. The egg can only be eaten if you're going to eat the mother. What do we mean by that? Why does the eating of the hen have to do with anything? So, Heichi Damin, this is really clarifying what Rab Zera is saying. Amar Abaye, Kigoin Shalakocha Stam. You bought a hen, and when you bought a hen, it was not clear by you whether you bought it to eat it, whether you bought it for it to lay eggs. You leave it open. And now let's speak out by heart. We have this general Shas topic known as Bereira, which is retroactive clarification. What were to happen if on Yom Tov you decide to eat the hen? When you determine on Yom Tov that you're eating the hen, retroactively we say you bought it to eat. Once we establish that you bought this hen to be eaten, then the egg, which is just food coming out of food, a part of the food, the egg will be permissible. That's the meaning of the Beitzah. So if you shech the hen on Yom Tiv, is chuvrara de lachiloi medes, is the retroactively we say that the whole hen was bought to be eaten, and therefore chavra the egg is also permitted. But loi nishchata, if you don't shecht it, that non-shechting it is enough that chuvrara de lagala beitzah medes. Why you're not shechting a hen? You have it to raise that you should lay eggs. Oy bazoi. It's muksa and anachanami. And Rabbi Eliezer normally will follow the sheet of Beis Shammai, but don't forget that Rabbi Eliezer paskins like Rabbi Yehuda as far as muksa is concerned, and he indeed will hold that not only is the mother, but also the egg will have the status of muksa. Rav Mordechay Amar, another approach. right? That when the Beitzah says that he and the mother can be eaten, the chiddush of the Beitzah is primarily only about the egg. The fact that the Beitzah mentioned also the hen, guzma. Now the word guzma normally means an exaggeration. What he means over here is when someone wants to say the egg is so permissible, the egg is permissible, the mother is permissible, even though there's zikr, no novelty concerning the mother, as the Gemara clarifies. The Tanya, again another Beitzah, Mishum Rabbi Eliezer, Beitzah, again the egg here is an egg that's laid on Yom Tov, Teiachel, it can be eaten, the mother can be eaten. Then he says, and if you have a hatched chicklet and a froyach, now when did it hatch? We'll clarify that in a moment. The froyach, the chick can be eaten, and its shell can be eaten. Whoa, shell? My klipasi asks the Gemara, Ilema klipa mamish, klipa basachilahi. Forget about before you get into what will be the issue. No one eats shells. Elot means l'chayra efroyach b'kli pasai, that one may take a unhatched chick that you took out of the shell and eat it. L'chayra, you can eat the chick that you removed from the shell. No way. My friends, this is not even a Yom Tov Shabbos issue. I want you to know that if there is a egg that the shell breaks, so the chicklet, so to say, is hatched. If it didn't yet open up its eyes, there's a machloikas tanoim whether you can machlal shecht it yet or not. No, shchita resolves a living being, an independent living being. And we're going to learn about this in a few daf from now. So you can take a chick out of the shell? No way. At kanle pligi. Between Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov and the Chachamim, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, the first wide line. Here also there's a machloikas tanoim whether you are allowed to shecht it before it opened its eyes. If you go into an egg, you take a chicklet out, everyone will agree that this may not be eaten. Okay, this is not Shabbos Yom Tov, this is during the week. Elot must mean that when this other new Beitzah, when we speak about that you can eat the egg with the mother, the efroyach with the klipa, efroyach v'klipasoi guzma. It's an exaggeration. You did not remove it from its shell. You just want to say that it's so kosher, you can have it, you can have the shell. Hachinami te'achel hi ve'ima. It's really a guzma. It's really a guzma. And let's go like this. That we're speaking about a egg that we're speaking about the mother was designated to be eaten. The mother was designated, so there's no chiddush at all that you can eat the mother. There is a chiddush to paskin like Beis Shammai that you can eat the egg. Why would you think you can't eat the egg? Like we learned at Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yitzchak, one can think maybe make a gzeira. People, this is like the fruit that fell off the tree. This is like juices that flowed automatically. But the focus is not about the mother. The ikid is only about the chicklet. Atkan. And now we are beginning, like we mentioned in the introduction, we're going to have Rav's Shita in 3 cases. Let's see how far we can get today. And whatever we can get today, we'll continue on Daf Hey. It's all going to be the same Nakuda. Now that we established the din of Beis Hillel, that if you have an egg that's laid either on Shabbos or on Yom Tov, that egg may not be eaten, really meaning it may not even be handled. What's going to happen if you have 2 days of Kedusha, one back to back with the other, 2 consecutive days of holiness? And the first case will be Shabbos and Yom Tov in either order. And guys, whenever you read about is the egg mutar or aser, we're not focusing on the day that it was laid. We already understood, we all know the shita of Beis Hillel, we paskin like Beis Hillel. Of course the egg that's laid on Shabbos or on Yom Tov may not be eaten, may not be handled. Question here will be, if it's laid on Shabbos and Sunday is Yom Tov, can you have it on Sunday? Or if it was laid on Friday, Yom Tov, if Friday is Yom Tov, can you have it on Shabbos? So Itmar, Shabbos, Yom Tov, and they're consecutive, back to back with the other. Rav is Machmer. Rav Amar, Noilda Bazeh, Asura Bazeh. Who is the lenient opinion? Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Yechanan Amar, that Noilda Bazeh, is muteres bezeh. Now there's no need to explain the shita of Rabbi Yechanan, because, like we learned in the Mishnah, we learned the first Rashi in this Masechta, when the Mishnah said, Beitzah loy seyachel boy bayoim. Like, what would even be the issue? The question here is about eating it on the next day. What's the problem? So Rabbi Yechanan doesn't have to be explained. The Gemara has to explain Rav. So Nemo, are you telling me the logic will be that Rav holds that Shabbos and Yom Tov are considered Kedusha Achasi? They're considered like one extended period of holiness? Or in the words here of the Rishonim, is it viewed as a Yoima Aricha? Which might be a way we look at the 2 days of Yom Tov, which will be the way we look at 2 days Rosh Hashanah. But are you telling me that Shabbos and Yom Tov should be considered one day? So the egg that's laid on whichever one of these days is ushered on that day, but it becomes a 48-hour day? Absolutely not. What are we talking about, Chevra? We already mentioned this before, that an Eruv Techumen has to be placed if you want to go beyond the boundaries, but it's only valid for that holy day. And the 4 elders paskin like the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer concerning Eruv Techumen. What happens if I want to go, let's say the case will be Shabbos and Yom Tov, like it says in the Itmer. Yom Tov is on Sunday. On Shabbos, I want to go to the town to the north to hear the drasha there. And on Shabbos, and on Yom Tov, I want to go to the town to the south. Can you do that? So the 4 elders quoted Rabbi Eliezer that says, yes, you could. You could put 1 Eruv Techumen for Shabbos and another for Yom Tov. You know why you can do that? Because it's not considered one day. If it would be considered one day, then you would only be allowed to place 1 Eruv Techumen for all of the 48 hours. But we paskin like Rabbi Eliezer, and so says Rav himself. So it doesn't make sense. Why would Rav be machmer? Answers the Gemara, Gewaldig. The second approach we had in understanding the sheet of Beis Hillel, upon which we paskin, based on whom we paskin, that the egg may not be eaten on Shabbos, farvos, because if Shabbos falls out after Friday Yom Tov, when the egg is born on Shabbos, it means it was completely finalized, finished, prepared the day prior. Day prior is Yom Tov. We have this rule that ein Yom Tov meichen lo Shabbos. How can you eat it if it was not prepared on an ordinary weekday? Or similarly, like we learned, that if Yom Tov is on Sunday, which is after Shabbos, if the egg is laid on Sunday, it means it was prepared on Shabbos. Ein Shabbos meichen lo Yom Tov. Now we extend it, like we learned, Akzeda, to any day that it's born. Oh, so Rabbah subscribes, Rav is le'achana de Rabbah, and therefore he says that if an egg, let's go Shabbos and Sunday Yom Tov, Shabbos and Yom Tov on Sunday. So if the egg was laid on Yom Tov, when was it prepared? The case here is that it was laid on the first day of these 2 holidays. It was laid on Shabbos. When was it prepared? On Friday. Doesn't make sense what the Gemara is saying. What does Achana Darab have to do with our case? All of the 3 cases of Rav, the case that we're learning now, 2 days Yom Tov, 2 days Rosh Hashanah, is always only speaking about the scenario where the egg was born on the first day, and we want to know what status does it have on the second day. So the Gemara is saying that since Rabbah subscribes to Achana de Rabbah, therefore he is machmer. No, Zay Masber. How does that work? The egg was laid on Shabbos. The day prior to Shabbos is Friday. Friday was a weekday. It was prepared on a weekday. Now, we get it. We learned above that enachanami, that really Hachana Darabah is only going to be where Yom Tov is before Shabbos, and then in extension, we added it to no matter when is Shabbos, to no matter when is Yom Tov. But what does that have to do with our case? So Tosfos here, the second Tosfos, second from the top, the second from the bottom, he explains like this, that when an egg is born on Shabbos, even though, yes, the Gemara said before that the egg is finished, it's finalized, it becomes completed the day prior. But don't discount the act of birth itself. The fact that the egg came into the world on Shabbos, that action makes it available for you to eat it. It's also being prepared. So it was also prepared on Shabbos. So since it was prepared on Shabbos, you may not have it on Sunday. Beautiful. And the same thing in the opposite. That if it's Friday Yom Tov and then the Shabbos, if the egg is laid on Friday, you cannot have it on Shabbos. Why not? Because even though be'emes 99%, the egg that was laid on Friday was finished on Thursday, but still the act of birth, that's the final step in its preparedness. So it was prepared on Yom Tov. Ve'ein Yom Tov meichen lo Shabbos. Guys, this is important, this Tosfos. Okay. So that explains why Rav is machmer, and the only way to explain the leniency of Rabbi Yechanan is by saying that he does not subscribe to Hachana de Rabbah. So that's very important. So let's remember, case number one of Rav is Shabbos and Yom Tov consecutive, one back to back with the other. Doesn't matter which one came first. Egg is born on the first of these two holy days. Rav says it may not be eaten on the second one as well. Not only not on the first, oichet, not on the second, because there is an act of hachana at birth. And therefore, if you're going to have it the next day, then the day of birth is preparing it for the next day. And no, Hachana de Rabbah means that if any food is going to be consumed either on Shabbos or on Yom Tov, it needs to be fully prepared on the previous ordinary weekday for it to be eaten on Shabbos or for Yom Tov. Now the Gemara says that this machlokes of Rabbi Yechanan is really katanoi. Tanoim already argued about it. What's the case? Nolda b'Shabbos. Here, the same case. Egg was born on Shabbos. Says the Tanach toichel b'Yontiv. If the following day is Yontiv, it could be eaten. The Zel B'Zach also, if the egg was laid on Yom Tov and Yom Tov is Friday, toichel b'Shabbos. This is like Rabbi Yechanan. However, Rabbi Yehuda Omer in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, no. Adayin hi machlokes. Only according to Beis Shammai, tei achel. But according to Beis Hillel, which is how we paskin, loy say achel. Now we have a story. Ush bezichnei, that Rav Ada bar Ahava, the host of Rav Ada bar Ahava. So the host had this host that one of his clients was this Amoira. Hava lehanach beitzim, the Yom Tov l'Shabbos. So there were eggs that were laid on Friday. Friday was Yom Tov. The host wanted to know whether he can eat the eggs on Shabbos. Rashi says, again, guys, don't forget, on Shabbos you can't cook. So he would have it raw. Also, he went to his client, he went to his guest, he went to Rav Ada bar Ahava and Omerlei, my le'atvinu ha'idna. He went further. I want to know whether I can roast it now, because you can't roast it on Shabbos. Only to eat it tomorrow. Wow. So Amalei, I don't understand. My daitach, your thinking doesn't make sense. First of all, Rav and Rabbi Yechanan, are you thinking that since Rav and Rabbi Yechanan, the rule is halachic Rabbi Yechanan? Even if that's the case, even if we're going to paskin like Rabbi Yechanan, all Rabbi Yechanan is saying is on the next day you can eat it. On the next day you can handle it. I feel Rabbi Yechanan like kashari ela legoyma alamachid. You can only swallow it raw because our case was that it was hatched. It was laid on Yom Tov. But on the day that it's laid, Rabbi Yechanan also holds like Beis Hillel. You can't even move it. So the question is whether you can swallow it raw. Aval biyoymei. But to handle it on the day that it was laid on Yom Tov, avad nisht loy. And ve'hatanya, that's benichusa. It says in a Beitzah that achas Beitzah shenolda b'Shabbos, achas Beitzah shenolda b'Yom Tov. Ein metaltal and oisa. We had this above. The Beitzah and Dav Gimel, the first case in the Beitzah and Dav Gimel Amid Beis. You can't handle it, not even to use it as a cover for another utensil, not even to use it as a base for the legs of a bed. Nekuda. So even if you're going to tell me because of the general rule, Rav Rabbi Yechanan, halachic Rabbi Yechanan, it will have nothing to do with you being allowed to fry it or to roast the egg on Friday because it was laid on Friday Yom Tov, and on that day it's completely muktzah. Another story. Ush bezichnei de Rav Papa or v'amrila. There was a person that came to Rav Papa. It was the balabas or it was another yid. Havalei hanach beitzim. Here wasn't the opposite. The eggs were laid on Shabbos. And this Yid wanted to eat them on Yom Tov. Again, that's the machlokes, Rav and Rabbi Yechanan, also coming. Now he came to Rav Papa on the day that the eggs were laid on Shabbos. Amalei, and he asked him, Mahu lemichlinu lemacher, will I be allowed to eat these eggs tomorrow? So Rav Papa responds to him, Zil ha'idna v'solamacher, come back tomorrow to address this. And why did he tell him to return? So Rav Papa quotes the Rav, Loimoiki amoire ilave miyom tova lechavre. Rav, once he made Kiddush on Yom Tiv, even though by the letter of the law, a Rav is not allowed to paskin when the Rav is inebriated. But the moment that dissipates, and it doesn't take 24 hours for it, then he is making a comment. Inebriated. Shkoyach. So when you are inebriated, then you have to wait until it dissipates. It doesn't take 24 hours, at least by most people. Rav was machmer. He would wait a whole 24 hours before he would paskin. So Rav Papa mishum shichrus, and Rav Papa did the same. In other words, whether at that moment he was after Kiddush or doesn't matter. He would wait. He was sometime after Kiddush, immediately after Kiddush, 6 hours after Kiddush. Come back tomorrow. Come back tomorrow before he made Kiddush for the next day. This is Shabbos, right, going into Yom Tiv. And Kiyasa L'Machar, when he came back the next day. So then Amar Lei, Rav Papa tells this Yid, or he tells this host, Avdalad Amid Beis, I want you to know that Iku Hashta, had you not waited until now, then Ishtaloi, I would have made a mistake. I would have forgotten the halacha. I erroneously would have said what we just mentioned above, that generally we have this klal, right, klali hashas, to paskin, Rav and Rabbi Yechanan, halacha ke Rabbi Yechanan, and I would have said that, but now I remember, right, I would have said, I would have told you Rav and Rabbi Yechanan, ke Rabbi Yechanan, and I would have paskin, yeah, you can have the egg on Yom Tov, not on Shabbos, the next day. Now here it's convenient because on Yom Tov you can cook, you can fry, you can bake. However, now I remembered something. That Ha'amar Rava said, and we paskin like Rava, that Hilchasek Havasei de Rav Bahanatlas, that we do paskin like Rav in all of the three similar but not same cases, where there are 2 days of holiness, one consecutive with the other. Case number one is the case that we are discussing, Shabbos Yom Tov Shabbos. And here Rav is the Machmer, as we just learned. The case number two is 2 days of Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz. Happens to be that Rav was Mekel there. Rav holds that in Chutz La'aretz, if an egg is laid on the first day Yom Tov, you are allowed to eat it, handle it on the second day. And then the third topic, where Rav is one of the two opinions, is the 2 days Rosh Hashanah. And here Rav is Machmer. It's from the three cases, Rav is Machmer. In our case, he's Machmer. In the Rosh Hashanah case, again, the egg is laid on the first day Rosh Hashanah. The question is whether you can eat it on the second day Rosh Hashanah. And Rav Chen gesagt, bein l'kula, bein l'chumra. And thank God I waited, my chumra of waiting, not just until when it dissipates, but waiting a whole 24 hours gave me the opportunity to remember. And he told this Yid, or he told this host, that no, you may not have the egg on Yom Tov, farvas, because it was late on Shabbos. And let's go back to what Tosfos explained, and that's connected to Hachana de Rabbah, that the act of laying an egg itself is the final step of you preparing it. So now that it was prepared on Shabbos, you can't eat it. You cannot eat it on the following day. Now, before we go on to the other two cases, to the second case of Rav, which will be the case of 2 days Yom Tov, we're going to quote a similar scenario to an egg being laid. Very interesting case. Amar Rabbi Yechanan, right? 1, 2, 3, 4 lines from the top of the Avdalad and base. What happens if eitzim shenoshru min hadekel b'Shabbos? So you have a branch. The branch fell off the tree. Now, guys, on Shabbos there's nothing to talk about. Question is, am I allowed to use that branch next day that's Yom Tov? Says Rabbi Yechanan, Asur lahasikan b'Yom. Firewood. Can use it as firewood. It's mamash similar, right? An egg that's laid on the first day, can it be used on the next day? Rabbi Yechanan was lenient by the case of the eggs. Here is Machmer, Asur la'asikan b'yomtiv. You cannot use it the following day on Yomtiv. And Rabbi Yochanan said himself, Va'al tishiveni Beitzah. Don't challenge me by saying that I was lenient by the Beitzah. Why am I being stringent here by this piece of wood, by the branch that fell off the tree? I'll tell you why. My Tama, Beitzah, the reason why I'm lenient, Chaver Haltkop, the case there was, again, let's say it came out on Shabbos, and the next day is Yom Tiv. It's either way, but that's just the case that they spoke about. Mishum de beyoyme name chazel goyma. Aside of the muksa issue, which is an issue, but taking away the muksa issue, you are able, I know you can't cook on Shabbos, but you can swallow the raw egg on Shabbos. It's shayich for you to consume it on Shabbos. And yet, when we paskin, like everyone paskins like Beis Hillel, that you for sure may not eat it, you may not even handle it on the day that it was laid. And even Rabbi Yochanan is only lenient by allowing you to use it the next day, but not on the day that it was laid. So Meida Yediyah, everyone will remember, even though I'm being lenient by paskining that you can use it on Yom Tiv, but on Shabbos you cannot. The Bas Yoima Asura. Why? Because it's let's go with the approach of Muksa, Noilat. However, in our case, the branches fell off the tree on Shabbos. Since, forget about the din of Muksa. You anyways cannot use it. On Shabbos, what exactly will you use a branch for? For nothing. You can't make fire, you can't add to fire. So you not using it on Shabbos doesn't remind you of this whole concept of Noilad on the day is Asr. So the Rabbi Yochanan says, if I would be lenient, if I were to be consistent, then people they would think that on the day that it falls, it's permitted. In other words, what happens if a branch falls on Yom Tov on that day? Then it won't be okay. Then it won't be. People won't know that. The asu, right? The esmal, they're going to only say the esmal. You know why no one used the branch yesterday? Because it was Shabbos. So he says, in my case, I am going to be machmer, and I'm going to tell you that this branch may not even be used next day on Yom Tov. Another case about the topic of a branch falling off a tree. Listen to this. You have a branch that fell directly into an oven. On Yom Tiv, what did we just establish from Rabbi Yochanan? Clearly that a branch that falls off a tree is mamish like an egg that was laid on Yom Tiv or on Shabbos. On that day, boy by Yom It's Asur. Here it fell into an oven. Says Rav Mashna leniency. It's a problem, but you know what? I have a solution. You add in the oven wood that you already had prepared to use as fuel for Yom Tiv, and umasikan, and you got no problem, and you can heat the oven with it. Now let's not focus b'chlal on how can you move it. Let's not focus on the muksa. Point is that the wood is, let's say, forbidden wood. But if the food will become warmed or cooked or baked, not only from a prohibited wood, but also from a permitted wood, that resolves the problem. Now there's many challenges with that. So first of all, forget about the food becoming baked, becoming cooked, becoming warmed as a mixture of permitted and prohibited. Before we get there, in other words, you're going to end up handling that branch. It fell off a tree. It was connected to the tree on the beginning of Yom Tov. You got a muksa issue. So the Gemara says, muksa is bottle. Wow. Kiven the ruba de heteraninu, when we Rav Masna said, you have to be marbe eitzim muchana. Marbe is meduyak. You have to have roiv, non-muksa pieces of wood. Now we apply the din of bittul, once you already nullified it. So ki kamahapech, when you are stoking the flames, when you're going to be arranging the woods, behetera kamahapech, aha, bittul. Hold on, classical question. Bittul is never a lechatchila, right? Then he's shaking his head. Bittul is b'di'evet. You can't deliberately nullify an isur. V'vitnana, a Mishnah b'feidish, that ein nevatlin isur lechatchila. Right, the whole case over there in Trumais, that if you don't
You just back up for 1 second.
Yeah.
If you're not able to be mevatel, what are we allowed to do that? Meaning it fell into the oven. Do we then say we let it burn out on its own and then we change it?
Correct. Or sweep out the oven, sweep it out and put in wood. And Rav Masna's saying is you can make benefit of it. You can't just light the oven with it, add more wood. So answers the Gemara, this is a big Gemara here. You know when? And I know we're going back and forth with muksa. Chavra, muksa is a derabanan. It's a quasi doiraisa. It's a very stringent derabanan. But for this halacha, that ein mevatlan is a lechatchila, the Gemara argues over here, avol b'derabanan mevatlin. But we got ourselves a huge problem. What's our problem? What did we learn now? What did we learn on Amud Aleph? Ravashi. What did we learn also on Daf Gimel Amud Beis? That says, Kol davar sheyesh lematirin, afilu b'derabanan loy batel. This is a classical davar sheyesh lematirin, because the problem is muksa. The problem is only that this branch fell off the tree today. Tomorrow the branch is good. So ma'ikal meimar. In other words, forget about mevatlan lechatchil or not. How does nullification even work? It should not become nullified. So the Gemara has a very innovative answer. If when you will benefit from it, it will be a prohibited thing, it's not going to be nullified. When do we benefit, my friends, from wood in an oven? You have a wood. The wood has to first burn. Then it becomes a coal. And then you put food in. By the time you are benefiting from a wood, b'chlal, it's no longer be'en. Hachi over here, mikli kali isuram. The isur is already consumed by the time you're deriving benefit from it. Wow. And therefore, even according to Ravashi, even by a drabanan, davar sheyesh lematirin, this will be nullified, because by the time you're deriving benefit from it, the isur is not be'en anymore. Now, don't forget, guys, Rav Masna is not saying that you can just light up the oven. He's not saying that. He's saying you have to add wood. In other words, we're using bittul. We're using bittul lechatchila. The concept of, since your benefit is coming only after it's already consumed, after it's burned, that's only to address the problem of a davar sheyesh lematirin. I know we're flying through, but this was very big statements, and that concludes the first of the three Ravs. The first one, Shabbos and Yom Tov, consecutive, one back to back to the other. Rav was machmer that if an egg is laid on the first, it also may not be handled, not be eaten on the second. Now we're going to at least start. Let's start case number 2, and this is going to open up the whole topic of 2 days of Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz, which we call Shnei Yomim Tovim Shel Goliyos. That for Yidden that are in Golus, we're speaking about a geographical Golus. You can be in Eretz Yisrael and be in Golus as well, but we are referring to the areas that during the times when we established a calendar by the testimony of witnesses in front of the Sanhedrin, and after we were unable to use the technique of torches, as we'll explain in a moment, so they needed to send physical messenger shluchim, and there's only that much you can travel to come to the places before the 15th of the month. We're focusing on the 15th because Sukkot is on the 15th, because Pesach is on the 15th, and I know the emesis is that Shavuos is already the 50th day from. We're going to not speak about Shavuos right now, and we're not going to speak about Rosh Hashanah right now, but we're going to focus on the 2 Yomim Tovim, and we know that nowadays, what we call outside Eretz Yisrael, we keep 2 days on Yom Tov, the same kasha. What's the question? What happens if there is an egg? It was laid on the first day. Yes, on the first day it's asur. We're not talking about that. That's the Mishnah. Are you allowed to eat it, to handle it on the second day? Rav Omar, noil de bezeh, muteres bezeh. Now this, l'choura, that's your classical shtei kedushos. Shtei kedushos means, how do we view the second day Yom Tov? And let me explain to you the 2 ways of looking at it. Way number 1 is that there is only 1 day Yom Tov. There's only 1 day Yom Tov. We don't know when the 15th is. So what we call the 15th, or what we might call the 16th, either of them, one of them is the 15th. Which means, if you want to look at it that way, there's only one day Yom Tov. We are keeping 2 because we have a doubt. But if an egg was laid on the first, mima nafshach, it's allowed to be eaten on the second. Because if the first day was Taka Yom Tov, it was not allowed to be eaten on that day. But today is not Yom Tov at all. Not Yom Tov at all. If today is Yom Tov, so what? It was laid out of Yom Tov. That's perfectly okay for it to be eaten on Yom Tov. 2 kedushas. Now, what will be the other side? The other side would be, is that since there was a period of doubt, the Chachamim decreed that we have to take the whole 48 hours and view it as one long day. If you view 2 days not as, I have a suffix, which one is the day? Yom Tov is only one day. I don't know which one is the day. That's called 2 kedushas. Yoima arichta, one day, means that rabbinically, God said, Yom Tov is a day is 24 hours. Because of the doubts that they had as to which day is Yom Tov, the Chachamim made an enactment. And they said that you have to view these 48 hours like one long day. If that's the case, an egg that's laid is prohibited on that day. Well, this day is 48 hours. That's the other opinion. Ravasi Omar, Nol de Bazeh, Asura Bazeh. L'choyre, Ravasi subscribes that that's Kedusha Achas. We'll have a problem with Ravasi, because as we will see, it appears that Ravasi doesn't hold Kedusha Achas. So Leima, Frekti Gemara, you telling me that the first white line, that Kosava Ravasi Kedusha Achasi, that it's a rabbinic, one extended period of holiness? I know that many people hold that, but not Ravasi. You know what Ravasi used to do? Ravasi mavdil miyoyme tova lechavre. Ravasi lived in Goliath, Babylonia. Between the first day Yom Tov and the second day Yom Tov, you know what he would make? Not what we do, Kiddush. In there he would put Havdalah. Now make no mistake, before we read on, don't think that Ravasi made Havdalah and thus treated after his Havdalah like Chol HaMoyed. God forbid, he did not. He did not. But he made Havdalah. The fact that he made Havdalah means that he did not consider it like one Yoima Arichta. No one makes Havdalah in the middle of a day. So we got ourselves a contradiction. Bishitas Rav Ashi, second line, in the white lines, clarifies the Gemara. Rav Asi Safuke Misapkali. Rav Asi, it's not that he says it's Yoima Arichta, not that he says Shtei Kedushos, he doesn't know how to view it. And that's why, even though he made Havdalah, he mamish kept Yom Tov. Elama v'avid hachel l'chumra v'hachel l'chumra. So Havdalah he made, because if it's Shtei Kedushos, just to cover your bases, you make Havdalah. I want to add something. What Rashi says over here. Even if it's Shtei Kedushos, many people did not know how to make a calendar. They didn't have that knowledge. Those people would not make Havdalah, even if they view it as Shtei Kedushos. How can you make Havdalah? You got a suffix, you're making a bracha levatala. What are you doing? Rav Asi Pashad was an expert in the establishment of a calendar. He knew how to make a calendar. He knew that the first day was Taka the first day. You know why he kept the second day? He kept the second day because maybe he held the Chachamim made azad takana that the 48 hours is one day. If the Chachamim said that, and it's not that I'm just covering my bases because I have a doubt, then you got to keep 2 days Yom Tov. And he kept 2 days Yom Tov. But since he held that maybe the Chachamim never said you have to keep 2 days Yom Tov, we don't know which day is which day. I know. So for that, he made Havdalah. But coming back over here, since it might be considered Kedusha Achas, L'chumra, if an egg was laid on one, it's going to be prohibited on the second, because if it's considered Yoima Arichta, it's still on the same day that it was laid. Amar Rab Zeidam, I want you to know that Kavasi Dravasi Mistabra, we should paskin like this stringent ruling of the egg. And guys, I know we learned on top of the Amid that the Rava said we don't paskin like him. Say that, but let's go through all of the Amoraim. Why is that? I'll prove it to you. Because now, meaning when Rab Zera made the statement, they knew the Chachma, the Soid Ho'iber. They knew when the 30th day will be, when the first day of the month will be. They knew that. And yet, continuously, the Kavdin and today Yoima. Why are we making is a proof that what? that the 2 days Yom Tov is not just a doubt because I don't know. Even when you know the Chachamim instituted that they should be viewed as a single extended day of Kedusha. So says Rab Zera. Says Abaye, Amar Abaye, no, punkt fakert. Kavasei de Rav mistabra. I'll prove to you that the Rav is correct. What is correct? That she'enoi choik. I'm reading inside Rashi. The Chachamim never established a single extended day of Kedusha. We have a doubt. So because of our doubt, to cover our bases, we keep both days. How do I know that? The Tanach, Chevra, here we go. Mishnah Rosh Hashanah, Barishaina, originally, after the Sanhedrin accepted the testimony of witnesses and they were mekadesh, they sanctified the Rosh Chodesh, Hoyamasi and Masuyas, they would light up torches on mountaintops, and one mountaintop will look at the other mountaintop, and that spread very quickly, very far, and everyone knew that which day is Rosh Chodesh. However, says the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah that these kutim, they undermine this entire method, because they would light up torches even though there was no such testimony given or accepted in the Sanhedrin. So they made a new method, that messengers have to go out. End of quote. So says Abaye, from the way the Mishnah words it, is mashma that ve'ilu batlu kutim, that if the kutim would stop undermining what we're trying to do, then we would go back. In other words, if we would tak and know when it is of din and chad yoma. Or similarly, wherever shluchim did reach of din and chad yoma. Period. Why is that? If the Chachamim, during a certain time of uncertainty, made a takana, made a choik, that we got to view the 48 hours like one day, from then on it should be irrelevant whether we know when Rosh Chodesh is or not. The fact that it's mashma from the Mishnah that it's only because we don't have a method is the charaya that if we do make a method, you only have to keep one day. In other words, we keep 2 days out of doubt. This is not about after Hillel made the calendar, we'll continue with that with the next year. Now we have a calendar that was affixed, we'll get to that later. But the point is that Rav Paskins is halacha based on the concept that we view 2 days of Yom Tov and Golios, not like a rabbinically ordained 48-hour extended day. No, there's only one day Yom Tov. We did not know when it is. To cover our bases, we keep 2 days. Shtei kedushos mimanav shach. The egg is allowed to be consumed on day number 2. God willing, to be continued.